Bold leaders, no buzzwords, no BS. This is Mastering Workplace Culture, real talk on crafting workplace cultures that deliver results. Each episode, we go beyond corporate speak and talk with leaders who've actually done it. Those who've faced breakdowns, made bold moves, and built organizations where respect and results carry equal weight. If you're ready to challenge assumptions, gain actionable inspiration from proven mentors, and build a workplace culture that actually works, this podcast is for you.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mastering Workplace Culture. I'm Mark Babbitt. I'm one of your co-hosts, and Chris Edmonds is with us. Hello. Say hello, Chris.
Welcome, everyone.
And I cannot wait to introduce today's guest. With 18 years of experience in finance and private markets, Kevin Moore now serves as the founder of Serac Ventures. As a partner at Spur Capital Partners, Kevin led investments in top-tier early-stage venture capital fund managers, as well as select co-investments and direct investments. He was also the director of angel investments and venture advisor at I2E. Before working in private markets, Kevin spent 8 years in finance, including work as a bank examiner at the Federal Reserve Bank, one of Chris's former employers, and as financial advisor at Morgan Stanley and Northwestern Mutual. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for that introduction. Glad to be here.
Well, let me start with our questions, Kevin. We couldn't help but notice through your career in VCs, investing, finance, you began your professional life as a civil engineer. And Mark is also what he calls a recovering engineer. How does your education and experience in engineering help your everyday life and work today?
I feel like, thank you for the invitation to the show and looking forward to this conversation. Engineers, I believe, are really good at being curious, and that curiosity leads to wanting to know how things work. And as a kid, I was always like that. And I was sort of the quintessential taking things apart. I'll do it myself, all those different things, just figuring it out. And I think that is sort of leads to a process-oriented mindset. And investing is very much the same, where the best investors tend to create processes for how they get to a conclusion, and the degree to which that works and you can repeat it is the same like engineering. One of the things that I always carried with me as an engineer was factors of safety, and we over-engineered everything. I remember once being in DC on an internship, learning how to build and design roads, and they said, yeah, even when the roads are wet, you can drive the speed limit and even go above that because they've engineered them to drain a certain way. So all these different things that we learned, but the applicability of the skill set, of the ability to just dive into problems and create processes is applicable no matter what you do.
Very interesting. Yeah, the recovering engineer thing is real. It really impacts almost every aspect of my work life. You know, you're 40 years later. Yes, I'm old. 40 years later. So yeah, it's an interesting foundation on which to build.
Well, I used to get asked about that all the time because they're like, well, engineering to finance, like, how does that work? And really the financial side of it came toward the end of my matriculation in college, where I started getting interested in, okay, I'm about to graduate. I'm going to make real money for the first time. Maybe I should learn a little bit about how this works. So I picked up this book called Personal Finance for Dummies, and I started reading that. And that sparked my interest so much so that I was like, man, maybe I should have did my career in this. But I was in my last year of school. I'm not changing my degree. So
that in common too, Kevin, because I didn't get interested in business and especially the startup world until I still had electives to take in my last year and took all business classes and went, holy crap, I really like this.
Yeah.
I mean, they've done this.
The idea that you can put money somewhere and then a few months or years later it grows, and then the idea of compounding, I was just blown blown away by it. My parents never taught us about money.
Hmm.
And I don't know, there's two reasons that could potentially be why. I think some parents don't teach their kids about money because their kids have never had to worry about money, like mine. And then some parents never teach their kids about money because they never had money. And sometimes kids like me, it was a combination of the second and the third being kids are sort of left by themselves and have to fend for themselves all the time.
Right.
So there's no one there to teach them about money.
Yeah.
So when I got older, the curiosity that I was sort of led to, hey, I didn't grow up with money. So now I'd like to teach myself about money. And that's sort of how that interest started.
Yeah. I just had a conversation last week with an old friend. And Chris, I'm going to try and clean this up a little bit. He said, my old father and I had more conversations about the birds and the bees than we did money. And we had a conversation about the birds and the bees.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
just didn't talk about money at all. Zero.
Yeah. I mean, those aren't easy conversations either way, but my wife and I tried to be more intentional than our parents were.
Yeah. Nice. Good for you guys. Kevin, your personal and professional life has been full of self-imposed. Some people might even say self-inflicted, like 100-mile bike races and 100 running your first marathon. I would say those are maybe self-inflicted challenges and certainly leaps of faith.
Mm-hmm.
When you started Serac Ventures, what kind of a work team and within what kind of a culture did you want to run? What was the big leap of faith there that gave you the confidence you could do this?
The biggest thing was having been put through the grinder of having to build in other places. As a financial advisor working on 100% commission, you have to build your own business. You're given the path for how to do it, but hired my first team member and we built a great relationship and went to another team where I was a partner on a team, and you have to sort of come in and understand that culture and figure out how to find things to relate with other people that you may not as easily be able to do that. But it has to be very intentional. But I think the courage to start Serac Ventures came from those experiences, but also answering three questions. The first was, do I enjoy the people I'm working with? Not like, do I hate them, but is this the team I want to work with? Two, is this the type of work that I find interesting? And three, is the work intellectually challenging? So I wanted to be able to answer yes to all three of those questions. And I knew that if I couldn't, then it was time to move on and create my own team, my own culture, my own interests, my own challenges. And the culture at Serac Ventures is one where we encourage open communication. Everyone's ideas are valid. Everyone has to contribute. And people, if you're at the table, you need to state your opinion. I've always believed that. I learned that from serving a lot of boards and having that sort of pulled out of me.
Yeah.
And now at Serac Ventures, we're very intentional about making sure that we don't spend a ton of time in the beginning of our meetings not getting to the meeting. But I think that culture of, hey, we're human beings first and then we're colleagues. So I think that's very intentional. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to build that at my own firm now.
Yeah. Well, and what is interesting, again, Mark and I have been observers of the human condition since probably we were toddlers. So I think about my mom and dad, and every family's got interesting dynamics, right? But your comfort with process would seem to me to have fit very well into this vision you had of the culture you wanted at Serac Ventures. But you've got to be the role model of the culture that you want. Was that easy for you? Was it as it played out maybe the way you expected it did, that folks just embraced it and that kind of thing?
The culture that I believe every person who's at the top needs to have is one of continual personal development. I believe that when I'm the best version of myself, then I can confidently speak to my employees and colleagues about them being the best version of themselves. And let me give you an example. I believe that every single data point that you put out into the ether is a reflection of your brand and who you are. And one of the things I learned very well at Spur Capital was that very point. Like when we put something out there, it's a representation of who we are. And we should always try to be the best version of who we are. And how much more is that sort of demonstrated if I'm doing that? And the more I'm working on my leadership skills, my intellectual skills, all these different things, I can then sort of model to everyone on the team that is going to make our organization better. The more that every one of us is pursuing excellence, the organization is going to be excellent. And that took some time to figure out.
Well, I want to add, if I can. Sorry, Mark. One of the things that my wife and I got exposed to, boy, probably 40 years ago. It was pretty early in our marriage, but we went. YMCA executive was my role. My wife was a resource teacher up in beautiful Redwood City, California, and we were part of a great YMCA organization that would do retreats every year in Yosemite in the valley. And it's like, well, that's a pretty cool place to go, have learning and development happen. And one of the presentations was by a financial planner of one of the volunteer members of the committee putting this 3-day weekend together. And this financial planner just wowed us. And of course, his approach was, and financial planning is different than VC and investment and all that kind of thing. But we had a lot to learn. And we still today are with the company that took his over once he retired after 30 years. And so here I am in an interesting position with our trust changing, and I'm going back to the agreements that he helped guide us to help our kids know that the only way you're going to have money left over for retirement is to start planning way back then, and to be able to trust that if you're not clear about what your goals are, then you might be distracted by any number of things. So part of the process orientation that I'll bet you are focused on is there is Mark and I were just talking about this last week about personal integrity of the folks that serve on your team, that are in your company. And if you've got leaders that demonstrate personal integrity down to frontline team members, new kids on the block, the longtime veterans, that demonstration of integrity, which we very much saw from our financial planner, is going to serve the business exceptionally well. Have you found that to be true?
The expectation is that if I'm able to model that, then we're going to attract that. And I'm a huge believer in that you attract what you are. And anyone that is interested in working with Serac Ventures will feel that. And if they're not going to be interested in being here. I heard someone say any culture at a company is what they permit or allow to happen. And if you have a culture where it's a culture of high expectations, of excellence, integrity, open communication, everyone's voice being heard, then you're going to be held to that. However, if you have a culture where every now and then people are allowed to put things out into the public that aren't precise, or to say things that aren't in line with our sort of ethos, then that stuff compounds. One of my favorite books is The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. And if you've ever read this book, it talks about how greatness is not something that occurs all at once. It's a compounding growth of certain things. And the problems are the same way. So the moment you let something small sort of infiltrate your culture and you don't fix it, it's going to get bad. And I have so many examples of that on teams that I've worked on. And I vowed that in my own firm, that was not going to happen.
Outstanding.
Throughout your career, Kevin, what we've learned about you is that you've maintained this focus on growth, both personal and professional for your team and your company. The more your team grows, the better your company does, right? Tell us why. Tell us when that trait became important to you. When did you realize how important is it? Like, if I focus on growth, not just for my company, but for the people helping me grow my company, I will be a better leader. When did that become important to you? When did that epiphany go off?
So many, I think the biggest part of that started when I was toward the end of my tenure at Spur Capital Partners, that when you're in an environment where venture capital moves fairly quickly, and the degree to which you're able to keep up with the pace of technology and what's happening in the industry helps your investment strategy, really. But when I think about growth, it's more about, am I sort of refining and becoming better at the craft of my business? And part of my morning routine is making sure that I'm doing that. I have a 15-minute block where it's very, very intentional. And a way to pass that on to people on the team is saying, hey, here's what I do. Here's what I read. Here are some suggestions for how you could do that. But growth is one of them. This is such a good topic, and we could go really deep on this. But growth is an area where it's all about your mindset. And we've sort of started to realize that, and I have over the last few years, about if your mindset isn't one where you are able to see the areas of opportunity such that you can grow, then it's going to hold the organization back. And as a CEO or leader or general partner, if I have limitations in my mind, then the company's going to grow. So I have a mindset or a leadership, a business coach, where we talk so much about your core values and your mindset and understanding, man, the only limitation is really what's up here. And we are designing a program at Serac Ventures where one of the first things that we're going to be doing with every founder that we invest in is trying to understand where their mind is. Mm-hmm. We can't invest in a high growth company if the founder is the limit of growth for that company. And maybe last sort of story, anecdotally, I was talking to a founder who they'd done pretty good. They had some revenue and some customers, and it had been a number of years. And I asked this founder, are you satisfied with where you are right now in your company? And she said, things just got to be right. We got to do this. We got to do that. And I said, is it possible that you have been the limiter to your company's growth because everything has to be so precise before you move forward? She paused and said, no one's ever asked me that question, but I suppose you are probably right. And this is a type of founder where they have so much potential, but they need to unlock this fear of everything needing to be perfect before they actually make the next step. My mantra is progress over perfection, and people who take action are the ones who win.
It really goes again to the speed of venture capitalist kinds of best practices today, that you've got to be willing to go with, this is the best information we have right now. If we wait, then things are going to change, and they may not change for the benefit of this opportunity for the company.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess what we're sort of talking about is like culture and team building and those things. I'm a firm believer that the person at the top sets the pace and creates the opportunity for people to do exactly what you're saying is, hey, I want you to move fast, but very calculated. And I want you to be free in how you think. And you have my support and we'll move together, but we have to move and just don't sit on things forever.
That's wild. Well, let me, if I can, tie to our mutual experience at two different Federal Reserve banks within the system, me in San Francisco, and you were in Kansas City. Is that right?
Yes. The Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City has 4 branch offices. Well, 3. The main one in Kansas City and 3 others. Oklahoma City was one of them.
Gotcha. Well, with your experience at the Fed, at Morgan Stanley, et cetera, those kinds of organizations are known for sometimes, or maybe all the time, very rigid legacy cultures. How did those experiences shape you as a culture leader today?
Morgan Stanley was all about growth to whatever detriment.
Oh, that's interesting, which is kind of classic.
I assume by growth in this case, you mean results. Yes?
Results by way of, we don't care how you do it, just get people in the door. They were asset gatherers. And
Gotcha.
Whereas at Northwestern Mutual, it was more holistic. We care about you as a customer. And their customer experience was just amazing. And I think it's part of the reason why that company's been so successful for a long, long time and has expanded what they do. And I've been in organizations, say like the Fed, where the Fed is very, Chris, you know this, the Fed is very sort of regimented in its approach of accuracy. And at first, when I went there, I thought, if my long-term goal is to be in venture capital, how is this ever going to apply to that? But the machinations of that role are very applicable, and what you learn about how and why that's important are very transferable. I want to go into the details of what we would do when we would go on site at these banks, but we knew what we were doing. We knew why we were there. People took us very seriously, but that's because of either our position or our abilities or both. And I think within any organization, when you step through the door, you want people to take you seriously, and they'll take you more seriously if they understand what they're going to get from you. And the Fed was very good at that.
Yeah, bank supervision was one of my client groups within the Fed, and I learned a bunch. One of my other client groups happened to be security, keeping track of what was a whole bunch of dollar bills in the basement. And their needs, of course, were very, very different than bank supervision.
Yeah, the hard part for me at the Fed was someone who isn't used to being away from people and sort of locked away to do one particular thing. That was difficult for me. And I remember I was in Nebraska, cold like you wouldn't believe.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, man, what am I doing here? And I heard this voice in my head say, you know what? Wherever you are, what did the voice say? It said, wherever you are, be there. And it just was so clear. And what I learned from that was you are where you are for a reason. And there's something here that you need to learn that's going to prepare you for the thing that you really want. But don't interrupt the process. Otherwise, you're going to miss it. And that was an epiphany for me. And once that epiphany occurred, things for me at the Fed completely changed. I started getting promoted and just sort of embracing the suck of certain things that you go through.
Yeah.
I mean, and so that was an epiphany, and that opened up the career to other opportunities and sort of what I'm doing now. And I say this when I'm coaching young people, like younger people coming up in their career, is there's I think an air of impatience with a lot of people. And the very thing that they're asking for, they don't want to go through the process of what it takes to actually get there. And people are saying, hey, I want to grow in my career and I want more opportunity and I want to learn how to be a leader and I want to learn how to be patient and I want to blah, 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 blah. I'm like, well, have you ever considered using exactly where you are to make that happen? And part of the culture that I want to create at Serac Ventures is you're going to get that opportunity and we're going to give it to you if you come to that with the right attitude. And I just remember my career changed when I had that switch, but that switch didn't occur in a period where things were just super easy and I was in love with what I was doing.
Yeah.
Well, you've been running Serac Ventures now for a better part of 4 years, a little over 4 years now, right?
I started Serac in 2023, January.
Okay. All right.
So 4th year. So there's probably some moments of realization, both on the operational side and on the culture side, where you've learned something new as a leader. And there's also probably some times where you would go, wow, I wish I had that to do over again. Can you give us one example of both where you learned something amazing as a leader along the way and a moment where you go, what the hell was I thinking?
The first thing I learned is as a leader, I can't assume that people know what I'm thinking. Just because I know how to do something doesn't mean everybody else does. And when you hire someone and you put them in a position to do X, Y, or Z, your ability as a leader to make that clear and unambiguous is critical. And I wasn't always good at doing that. So I learned that as a leader, you have to make that clear. Where that has screwed up has been where I'm frustrated for months or weeks on end because I assume someone is doing what they're supposed to be doing. They think they're doing what they're doing is right the whole time. And then things come to a head and it ends up into a big, massive argument or frustration. And I'm not going to say who, but I've worked with someone who worked at Serac Ventures, and I was just very curious on how they were spending their time during the day. And I set out what I thought were clear expectations. And what I've learned better as a leader, instead of getting mad at the employee, I take extreme ownership. Jocko Willink's book. I love his book. Hey, if someone isn't clear on what they're supposed to be doing, then that's on me. And I'll tell him, hey, you weren't doing this because I didn't explain it well. So I'm about to do that now. And if I can do that and we're clear on expectations, and then the next time you do it, that's on you. That has been a learning experience. Even today, I was meeting with one of my colleagues, and I told her I'd identified this problem with how we were capturing information and where the information was. I literally had a notepad in front of me. I said, hey, I'm going to write down step by step the history of how this problem started and how we can solve it.
Wow.
And I sat down, I wrote it down.
That's a very engineer thing to do.
Well, it was, and at the end of it, I said, I want you to be 100% clear that here's the problem, here's how we're going to solve it, and here's where I think we can get if we solve it. Is anything unclear? In the early days of being in the leadership seat, I wasn't good at that. Now it's crystal clear. If people don't get it, it's not their fault. It's your fault as the leader.
And it's not going to get done. And what is so interesting, especially, and I'm going to say my experience with leadership development is as people are new to leadership, they don't know a lot, but they don't want any hint that they aren't fully competent today to be out in the ether, to be so they're angry when things don't happen the way that they hoped. And hope is not a sustainable strategy. You've got to be very, very crystal clear. This is step 1, step 2, step 3, just exactly as you did with this opportunity. And that might lead some of those new leaders to realize they don't know enough about the role or the job or the system to be able to do 1, 2, 3. And it's then I need someone really smart at that to tell us what the best 1, 2, 3s are. And we've really found that leaders can be coachable, but they've got to realize their egos really aren't relevant. And it's if you're interested in serving others, then you're going to learn a whole bunch of stuff you know nothing about.
And I guess, Mark, did I answer both of your questions? I think one of them was something that you learned.
The other one was, what would you do differently today? Which you did answer in a way when you threw your hands up and said, what am I doing here? But maybe there's an example you want to share with us.
One of the things I do differently today is tactically at the end of every meeting, I ask for a summary of what we just discussed. And if that person can articulate back to me what we discussed, then I did a good job explaining it. So there's the tactic of explaining what it is, explaining sort of the why, and then explaining, okay, are we headed in the right direction? Like, what is our next step? That framework, so what, now what, and what's next is very, very applicable to being a good leader. Where that can go awry is if that person can't explain it, then either A, it needs to be dumbed down, or B, I didn't do a good job of that. Specific examples are difficult because I do this with every single meeting that I'm in, even if I'm meeting with a founder. And I want to make sure we have a conclusion. In every founder meeting, at the end of it on my notes, I write to-dos. And if the to-do is no follow-up, great. If the to-do is I'm going to send you this, or I'm expecting to receive this from you, great. Tactically, every single meeting that I have, no matter what it is, I always send a follow-up email. And I set it to go out the next morning. And that email is, thank you for meeting. I'm so glad we did this. And here's what we're going to do next. Or here's what whatever. That is a rule. It can be difficult to do, but I never, this is a double negative. I never not do it. I do it every single time. But the biggest thing is clarity creates confidence. Yeah. And that is a mantra that as a leader, we have to be 100% doing and ensuring every single time.
Well, and you know this is true, Kevin, and Mark, and I coach this a lot, is if your people aren't delivering what you need, let's look at what their expectations are and how do we formulate those so there's consistency, there's clarity, and that's probably going to lead us to better delivery. So it's an interesting thing that I think, Mark, we do a pretty good job with leaders to not say, well, you moron, I might be thinking that, but let's get clear.
Well, and maybe an example is I get overworked, or used to, with managing my email inbox. And instead, I would assume that, no one can do that better than I can. But I realized that, no, I just hadn't gotten good enough at training someone to do it for me. So taking a step back is difficult for leaders to do, to say, hey, I need to fix the underlying broken reason why something's not happening so that I can teach it to someone else. And in my mind, I'm always, hey, if I can leave the business for a week or two and the business is still running, then I've done my job as a leader. Second, as a leader, I have to also be careful not to over-engineer processes and trust that someone understands the big picture. And I don't tell them how, but I give them the freedom to figure out the how. And that is way more fun from a
absolutely.
delegation standpoint than telling people exactly what they need to do. So many books that I've read have said, never tell people how, tell them what. And if they're a really good person, tell them what you want. And if they need help along the way, you can ask them, but a really good person is going to figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you. It seems as though, Kevin, that vulnerability, your self-awareness, those are traits that are vital to you as a person and as a leader of an organization and of a culture. So how have you mastered vulnerability and self-awareness? A lot of the culture leaders we work with have opportunities to get better at those two things.
The reality is, maybe just here's some vulnerability. When I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of resources. And as a result, I always felt that I was lower than a lot of people, even if it were intellectually. Like, we were homeless at one point when I was in elementary school. We didn't have the basics that you would want. So there was always this sort of inferiority complex that I had. And because of that, combined with curiosity, I just wanted to learn as much as I could in order to make up for this gap that I saw in myself. And into adulthood, that carried into fear of failure being my motivating driver to succeed, not the act of succeeding itself. Now that's sort of shifted into, there's been so many proof points along the way that, hey, Kevin, you don't have to think like that anymore. And I went and spoke. It was one time I've ever went and sat down with a psychologist. And I said, why am I this way? Why do I sometimes get defensive with my wife and with others? Like, where does that come from inside of me? And I started explaining he was like, Kevin, after what you explained to me, I can understand that you feel like you have to prove yourself to the world. And I said, he's like, you don't have to do that anymore. You've already made it. And that, and with some other things sort of convinced me, it's like, okay, now I can learn, not because I'm proving myself, but because I actually find it fun. And I get energy from that. I was talking to my wife just this morning and I said, you become such a more interesting person when you're able to be well read and have something of interest to talk about. So now the idea of continuous improvement isn't one about fear of failure. It's about fear. It's about this desire to understand what my limits are. How much can I learn? How much can I grow? Per the marathon and these tests of endurance with the bike rides on it. It's like, how far can I go? And that is exciting. And I wish I had realized that earlier in my life. I'd be in a completely different place. Not that I'm in a bad place, but that transition from fear to what is my limit. That's where I'm at right now. And I want to continuously and always explore trying to find it.
The humility expressed in that question, or that answer to that question, Kevin, is something that we just don't see very often. Chris and I have worked with some amazing leaders, and we've worked with some where we've had to walk away from contracts where their ego gets in the way of them wanting to achieve whatever it is that they brought us on to help. And maybe because they refuse to be chief role model, more of a do what I say, not as I do, or authoritarian thing. It may certainly be the ego that is their biggest barrier to success. But man, if all the leaders, Chris, that you and I worked with over the years had the humility that Kevin you just showed, the world of work would be a better place. Period. So
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I'm
Thank you for sharing.
I'm just keeping it real.
There have already been several moments in this conversation where people are going to hit the rewind button. The 3 questions, the epiphanies that they've heard along the way, they're going to rewind and hear it again. I know it, and that's certainly one of them. So again, thanks for sharing. Our last question about work for you. You guys at Serac enjoy a certain company culture, something that equally focuses on respect and results and personal and professional growth, a culture you're rightly proud of today. But the organizations that you guys consider investing in, maybe they don't enjoy a culture similar to yours yet. As a potential investor, and somebody who's controlling at least some of the strings that help a future partner move. What do you do when you have to take a company founder or leader aside and say, "Hey, love what you're doing, see the potential, but man, your current company culture needs some work."
Mm-hmm. We are in the process of creating a system to embrace the founder's natural abilities, but structure a path to growth and leadership in the way that we think that they can be. That's not easy. And some investors might say, well, we're just not going to work with that person. But I do think that our mantra is targeting non-obvious founders. And I think these things are skills, Mark. And skills can be learned. And to the extent that we can imbue how we think on others, that'd be great. And there's a founder that is in our portfolio that is just absolutely brilliant. And when I hear him talk, he says, I all the time, I did this, I did that. I'm like, man, in my head, I'm thinking, you got to stop talking like that. You're going to completely alienate your team. If you want to grow your team, it has to be we're going here, we're doing this. Our contribution, whatever it might be. But these are things where if we have a system and a culture in the market or reputation in the market of when you come to work with Serac Ventures, we're not just going to work on your business. We're going to work on you because you are the business, especially at the early stage where we are. And I think that can be systematized. So I'm a very open and direct person. And whenever I give people feedback, they don't take it personally because they know it's about them. And I expect others to do the same for me. As a business, though, we believe the hidden opportunities are in backing people who are open to that type of communication. And if they are, we can help them accelerate where they're going. Because we are like that. And we've accelerated where we're going because of that mentality. And it's not perfect, but I think the effort of doing so is worth it.
Well, and I appreciate you all being forward enough, direct enough with those founders to invite, you might be leaving money on the table here.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's the first time they've heard that, but it could well be it's the 18th time they've heard it today.
Have you ever heard of this story of this scientist who was trying to figure out a way to make this cycling team faster? And he was hired, he brought in, and he said, man, what if we could make the frame a little bit lighter by doing this? And what if the bikers shaved their legs? How much of an increment? Anyway, he found all this stuff. And as a result, the team that had hired him started winning like crazy. And not by a lot, by very little.
Mm-hmm.
In today's world, we almost live in this winner take all mentality. But
Totally.
If you examine how much the winners win by, it's not much. It's very, very small. I wrote a blog post on this very point. If you look at the distance between the Olympic gold medalist in any 100-meter race. And the person who got eighth, it's not even a second. So good companies strive for perfection in all of the small areas where there can be incremental minor improvements all the time because they compound into something bigger. And if we can do that at Serac Ventures with our culture, with how we invest, with how we treat our investors, that culture of incremental improving and excellence will over time put us ahead of our competitors. And we only need point whatever in order to win. If that's not motivating to business owners out there, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That almost reminds me of when we do our values and behavior surveys, and we let a leader see exactly how his or her team members view them based on their own self-defined values. And the first time that leader sees that and goes, wow, I'm really proud of myself. Yeah, I still have a couple areas I want to work on. I'm really proud of myself. I'm actually living the culture. And we definitely have some wars. Survey result, Kevin goes, holy crap, I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it's data, right? It's pure data. They can't argue with it, right? Yes, they might find an outlier or somebody who's still mad about something that happened 3 years ago, right? But for the most part, that data serves as a huge wake-up call, just like what you're doing serves as a wake-up call. And to Chris's point, maybe some of these leaders, especially the ego-driven leaders, have never heard such direct input. Never asked for input from their employees. Never asked for candid conversations from the people that watch them work, see how they work, see how they make decisions every day. And so that leadership wake-up call can be jarring, or it can be absolutely inspiring, depending on how people look at it.
Well, the company that I've seen win and fail over time, it always came down to the leader. 100%. Nearly 95% of the time.
Yep.
And yet very few of those leaders realize that they are the real problem.
Mm-hmm.
My company, I can't be the problem. No, and actually you can.
Exactly.
And you can, and you are. Mm-hmm. Well, as promised, we want to leave the last 4 or 5 minutes or so to kind of give you the chance to fill us in on what you do when you're not working with your fabulous colleagues at Serac Ventures. So fill us in on that a little bit.
If I just had a month to just do whatever I want, I would wake up in the morning and write. I love writing. The first book I wrote was about how to start a venture capital fund.
Wow.
And that was driven by the frustration of going through that and not having available resources as a guide. So I wrote a short book on that, self-published it. I've sold a bunch of that book all around the world. That was in 2017.
Wow.
I'm now writing an autobiography about my life, my journey, and sharing sort of the intricate details of that struggle and how overcoming that and what it took. And I think that would be motivating. It's sort of a contribution to the world.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And part of the sort of love of this business and just being a human is, we're not going to be here forever. The only thing we have left is our contribution to the world and our legacy. And I think writing is a great way to leave that behind. Athletically, like I said, I want to figure out what my limits are. So I'd like doing these races and something that's extreme. That's fun. That takes a lot of time. Enjoy traveling and spending time with the family. Now, my son is going off to college in the fall, actually in a couple of weeks for the first time. So that's going to present a new set of or actually more freedom for us to do some other things. But,
but different for you and your wife.
Yeah. And the other thing I think people need two things that create interest from others about them. And for me, I love reading. I read a lot of books and people enjoy hearing about those. And I enjoy the art and science of cooking. And
wow.
When you're able to sit down with someone, eat food with them, especially if it's food they made for you, and tell them about the ingredients and how it was made and why and where things come from, I'm telling you, that makes you such an interesting person. Or if it's about wine or some sort of drink, when you can go deep into things that everybody enjoys, but doesn't necessarily know the history of something, it makes everyone should have at least two subjects. For me, it's about reading and cooking.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm excited at your autobiography. I would love to get one of the first copies of that book.
I'm about 160 pages into it. The goal is to have the first draft finished by, I said my birthday, but it's probably not going to happen until the end of the year. But I'd like to get up to like 250 or so pages. Writing a book, people think, it's one of the hardest. It's not that hard. You just have to be disciplined to write. And
Chris and I have written several books, and we tell people all the time, writing a book isn't hard. Sitting down and actually doing it is the hard part. Because when you sit down and start writing, it just comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have to figure out, how do I write family and work and not being able to turn your brain off on all these other things going on in your life and actually just focus. Once you do that, writing is easy, but getting to that point, that's a bitch. So yeah,
it's something I journal every single day. And what amazes me is that humans have imagination, and the ability to translate that imagination into something shareable with others is the reason why I love books. I think, I forgot what Arabic culture it was, but they said the greatest act of appreciation for someone is giving them a book, because it gives people insight into what's happening into your mind or into your interests. And the ability to sort of share your story, Chris, or your story, Mark, with someone is most likely best captured in something that you write. Even better than you telling me.
That's exactly true. That's awesome, man.
It has been inspiring to talk to you. We are so glad you joined us today. I already mentioned this, but I'm quite serious about this. You have probably set a new record for people hitting the rewind button as they're watching.
Wonderful.
Just take
brilliant
note.
Insights. Yeah.
So we want to thank you for joining us. Again, highly insightful, inspiring period. And to our audience, this is the kind of conversations we want to have at Mastering Workplace Culture. So we hope you continue to join us. And when you listen to this episode with Kevin, reach out to us. Let us know when did you rewind to pick up on a moment of conversation that Kevin led. And we want to hear from you, just like you're hearing from us right now. We want this to be a two-way conversation. So please join us for more episodes. In the meantime, Chris, Kevin, thank you for joining me.
It's great to see you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
This has been Mastering Workplace Culture. No jargon, no corporate fairy tales, just leaders who show their scars and celebrate their wins. Do something with what you heard today. Subscribe, share, take action. Creating a culture that equally values respect and results is your responsibility. Go own it. When you're ready to make that happen, we're here to help. We'll catch you in the next episode of Mastering Workplace Culture.